There's a question here which I'm sure is echoed by many people. This came through on the Unbelievable YouTube. And the question is, why did God send COVID? Does he enjoy watching people suffer?
Well, I don't think that God enjoys people suffering. I can't think of any reason in the Bible to say that. But neither should we think that COVID was necessarily sent by God. I mean, it could have been, who knows? But it could be just the result of evil doing. Justin and I talked about this last time, about the carelessness that may have taken place in that Chinese lab that released this virus into the world. And so this could again be the kind of intertwining of natural evil and moral evil that so often seems to occur. And so we shouldn't necessarily think that this is something sent by God, but certainly we should say that it's something he permitted to happen, because he could have stopped it if he wanted to, but he permitted it to occur. And I think that whenever God permits suffering and evil in the world, he does so with a view toward a grander purpose that justifies that permission of suffering or evil. If you ask me what that purpose is, I would say that in the broadest terms, God's purpose is to bring as many people freely to salvation as he can, and that it may well be the case that only in a world suffused with natural and moral evil that the optimal number of persons would freely come to find God's love and forgiveness. I find that not at all implausible. When you look at the places in the world today where Christianity is growing at its most rapid rates, it will be in countries that have experienced terrible natural and moral evil, such as Ethiopia, China, Indonesia, El Salvador, and other places, whereas in the indulgent nations of Western Europe and North America, the growth rates are pretty much flat. So someone has actually asked me, why is it that God has not blessed the nations of Europe and North America with more suffering in order to bring them to salvation? It may be they that are disadvantaged and not the nations of Africa and Asia and South America.
As C.S. Lewis famously said, pain is often God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And I've always found that illustration you use, Bill, very helpful, of the fact that
I think that is just sociologically demonstrable. As I say, when you look at those countries in the world where the most people are becoming Christians and the church is growing most rapidly, I think it just gives empirical evidence to Lewis's suggestion.
My feeling has always been that the problem of evil is a problem if you've got a particular definition of God. That is, if God is essentially a divine babysitter who should never allow us to experience any kind of difficulty or pain, then obviously that's a problem. But if God's job is, as you say, Bill, to bring people to a knowledge of him, then there may very well be ways in which a certain amount of suffering does actually enable us to meet God in ways that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to see or hear.
And I would want to add one other point that the philosopher Daniel Howard Snyder makes effectively, and that is that the problem of evil is only a problem for someone who doesn't have any good arguments for the existence of God. But Howard Snyder points out, if you've got good reasons to believe that God exists, then the problem of evil is not a problem.